With a major crisis currently happening in the Middle East with Iran, and the fact that America is still actively fighting against terrorists with Operation Inherent Resolve. Yeah, I know, great name. Operation Inherent Resolve was set to go in 2015 due to rising tensions with big-name oil suppliers in the Middle East. And the one thing that I think has caused all of this in the Middle East is oil. When there are a vast supply of very valuable resources discovered in the area, it often causes instability as outside countries mess with foreign affairs trying to get those resources for themselves. It happened in South America during the 1800s and caused the fall of the Zulu Empire. And this conflict really lit up during World War I as the Middle East was fought over, and after the war, men still bitter about the countless lives lost in the conflict carelessly took what they thought their country deserved, despite countless protests from people that actually live there. With all this in mind, I wonder how this has affected the Middle East political scene and on a larger scale, the entire world's politics.
Let's do the breakaway, get hot and shake away. It's not as happy as...
Before we go into my own personal opinion, let's get some facts in place first. Out of the top 10 countries that produce the most oil, 6 of them are in the Middle East. These countries include Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, and finally Libya. Altogether, these countries total around 20 million barrels of oil per day, and with Saudi Arabia producing 11.6 million barrels altogether per day. But other places such as Yemen and Jordan actually have little amounts of oil in their land, and because of this, places like Jordan are stuck in a bad situation. The country is currently classified as a chronically water-scarce country, because less than 5% of the land is actually being able to be farmed on. Because of this, the economy is stifled by this, and like during the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, poor farmers had barely enough for their own families and even less to sell. While major sources of valuable resources often cripple a country in the long term, these resources bring in big amounts of cash, which could possibly jumpstart the economy.
Let's do the breakaway, get hot and shake away. It's not as happy as...
Sort of like a double-edged sword. You get instantly richer, but in the long term, your natural resources are exhausted. And with this influx of major resources, the local people are often forced to work in these dangerous jobs. This often leads to having sweatshops, like America during the 1800s, with the majority of the population underpaid and overworked. With this, the people are willing to cause civil unrest to change these desperate working conditions, as which happened in South Africa, when diamonds were discovered in the region. I almost said South America. I'm a genius. As a whole, most of the Middle East has a decent to little amount of oil. And while the top dogs make a huge amount of oil per day, it's often not refined or too crude to be sold and used, which is how Rockefeller became the richest man in American history, by refining oil and becoming a giant monopoly. But let's not go off topic. With this in mind, it's more apparent that the instability that has plagued the Middle East for centuries began with the region being thrown into war during World War I, and with it literally being half for the Axis powers and half for the Allied.
Let's do the breakaway, get hot and shake away. It's not as happy as...
Another huge thing that has caused huge amounts of instability is the radicalism of the Middle East that has destabilized power in government, and with the government powerless, bloody civil wars often break out, with civilians being caught in the middle. Look at the Iraqi-Kurdish conflict, which cost around 900 casualties in 2016, and uprisings in Iran was the most recent happening in 2014, which cost around 73,000 lives. One of the most bloody uprisings in Iran occurred in 1991, which led to roughly 100,000 people dying. Currently, another uprising can occur in Iran, and today in 2018, with huge amounts of civil unrest happening, and with Iran's Revolutionary Guard threatening to do a violent crackdown, demonstrations continue to happen in the country. The protesters seem in no hurry to back down to the military, and in some cases, the people in the protests are normal people, but in extreme cases, they're radical terrorists that show the same kind of savagery as the Japanese did during World War II. And because of this, normal civilians are accidentally being killed by police and military officials because they don't know if someone's a terrorist or someone's just a peaceful protester.
Let's do the breakaway, get hot and shake away. It's not as happy as...
World superpowers such as America and Russia have to get involved to make sure that they don't completely collapse. In 2016, America imported 10.1 million barrels of oil per day, and Russia currently possesses around 1/7 of all known oil reserves in the world. And because of this, they install governments that are friendly to their own country. For America, dictators such as Tenero Nugima, okay, I'm just gonna butcher his names, guys, please forgive me, and Ferdinand Marcos, and with Russian dictators such as Hugo Chavez and Kim Il-sung, who, by the way, Kim Il-sung literally endorsed brainwashing his own citizens to hate American imperialism. Fun, so that they could win the Korean War. But with these leaders, they often follow their own interests, which of course are to stay in power. And because of this, they only do what keeps the people who put them in power happy. But because of this, people get unhappy with their leaders and lead to what? Say it with me. Instability! The Middle East is equivalent to the powder keg that the Balkans were to the rest of Europe. But instead of just Europe, it's now America, and in a sense, the entire world. Oh my god!